Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhavyeva cha patithanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadvaita Gadadhara Shivashari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Mukha karoti vachalam pangurangayate girim yukrapatamaham vande Siguru Dinatarinam. Did we finish the questions from Monday? Or do we have two left?
Hare Krishna, we finished everything. I think we did everything.
Okay. If anyone has a question, put it in if we didn't answer. Of course, it's hard to remember what we were talking about. That was actually 48 hours ago. And in Kali Yuga, we don't remember that well. But if you do remember, and there's anything you want to ask, then you can. I don't think we even got to read anything, did we? No. Okay, so we can start. If no one has any questions, can you remind us what we were talking about? Chaitanya, you remember?
We stopped on the prayers of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
I mean, the questions, like the last few questions, you remember the topic?
Yes, I have the whole chat, and the last thing we discussed was how we should be working on our character and not.
Can you give me the last one or two questions, because I probably rushed through them? Because we maybe there's something more to discuss.
Let me see.
Yes, that's what we all need to say. Let me see. Krishna, let me see. Let me see my real self. Let me see you. Let me see myself. Let me see the truth.
We were speaking about the questions that Parameshwari Devi had as too.
What was her question again?
Her question was...
You can summarize it.
It was related with how Indian culture affects sometimes our view of what's...
Yeah. And just how we are affected by culture in general, yeah.
And then we had Stu Davidson's question about the topic of the intelligence of women.
Yeah. And we discover that intelligence is not part of the brain, it's part of the soul. So, ladies, you're off the hook. And you're saying, I've been a devotee for 10 years, and now I finally learned this. I could have saved on therapy bills if I would have known that, right? There's, well, I could say something, you know, when we don't understand context, then, you know, you just take something. It's like you're taking out of midair, and it's not meant to float in midair. It has a context around it. And that's part of the problem. And so I would say as a general rule, if something intuitively seems wrong or not common sense, not to reflect common sense or not to reflect reality, then, you know, it's not wrong to question it. It may be that our reality's skewed and we don't understand. That's, of course, there. But often it means we're misunderstanding context. And so we're taking something to mean one thing. by how we are accustomed to see it and define it, but it may not be the context in which it's presented. And of course, it's a challenge because our scriptures are coming from another time, another place. So context is often like really different. One Muslim was saying there's some analogy in the Quran or Islamic literature about parking your camel or tying up your camel, which is equivalent in modern day to parking your car, because that's what their mode of transport was camels. So if you're trying to figure out why they use the word camel, what does it signify? Is it the long neck? Is it pride? Is it you have to tie up your pride? You have to park your pride? No, it was just they rode camels, that's all. But if you don't know that, you can come up with a completely wrong understanding. So that's just a general challenge. Um, I was just thinking this morning, I have to make an admittance. Are you ready to hear this? I think the ladies will like this. I don't know. Some people may not like it, but I was just thinking, if I were a woman in ISKCON, like how would I respond to to being told I'm less intelligent? And I probably would respond objectively. I would say, yeah, I'm definitely less intelligent than some people, but just objectively, I'm not less intelligent than others. And I wouldn't, I don't think any of us should allow ourselves to be controlled by someone who doesn't have our interest in mind or is not qualified to control us. But I would do it humbly. But of course, that's my nature. I'm always like that. And if I were a woman, maybe I wouldn't have that nature. But Krishna has given me a nature where I could independently think outside of what other people are thinking. And Prabhupada said we should be independently thoughtful. So he's training us to think independently, of course, within the realms of sadhu, guru, and shastra. But, sometimes we're learning in ISKCON and sometimes we make mistakes. And if you understand it's a mistake and you go along with it, that's your mistake. Well, they told me to jump off the 10th floor of the building. Well, maybe you should have known it was going to hurt you if you did. Yeah. Something like that. Otherwise, we have a cult. Don't, if I'm the cult leader, this is what I tell you. Don't trust your mind. Don't trust your intelligence. Don't trust anything. Just trust me. I know what's best for you. You couldn't possibly know because you're an illusion. Plus, you're just a less intelligent woman, so how would you ever know? And then we formed a cult because the idea of the cult is opposite from the idea that Prabhupada gave us, to be independently thoughtful. How can I be independently thoughtful? I'm just an unintelligent woman. That's the oh, I didn't know Prabhupada's books weren't for women. They're just for men. Nobody told me. No. I never read that. I guess that because women are less intelligent, why should they read the books? So you can take it in so many ways and people can interpret it in so many ways. Um, you want to hear a story? I have to take your permission, Nadia Mani. This is a story that could upset Russians, but it's a true story of what Prabhupada did, so I'm going to take a chance. I've heard this story before, but I heard it today with a twist. So Prabhupada had a servant in the very early days, probably 68. And that time everybody was getting married. And this boy was not getting married because he was gay. And Prabhupada said, well, you should just, get married to a woman. That's, some people felt like, well, that's the cure. Just get married to a woman. So he did that. It didn't work. And then he was saying, Prabhupada, the marriage to the woman didn't work, and I can't really be perfectly celibate, and everyone's getting married. And anyway, to make a long story short, And Prabhupada told, he might have had a boyfriend, or Prabhupada said, get a boyfriend, whatever. He says that then, live with your boyfriend. And so that's not the point of me telling this story. The point of me telling this story is really important. So the devotee telling this story said, someone's going to say, where is that story? And this devotee who told the story said, well, I heard it directly from the devotee that was gay that Prabhupada spoke to. I heard it from him. Well, how can we believe you? Maybe you're just trying to promote some idea, your liberal agenda. How can we believe you? And he said something really interesting. And I think this is really important because maybe you don't think this way. He said, even if I couldn't give you written evidence, I mean, I heard it from him, but even if I just said I heard it from somebody, he said something really interesting. He said, anyone who knows Prabhupada, when they hear that story, would say, yeah, of course, that's Prabhupada. Of course he would say that. Isn't that interesting? Anyone who knows Prabhupada would say, oh, yeah, that's Prabhupada. He would adjust to help someone become Krishna conscious. And it's like, of course, this boy, he's about to go out and, have illicit connections. He can't control himself. So, like there's some letters, for example, where Prabhupada says, actually, you should chant 64 rounds a day, but you don't like to chant and you're too passionate. So I've given you 16. It's like I often joke, I say 16 is Special Olympics. It's like, we think 16, it's so much, it's so hard. And Prabhupada's saying, no, because you don't like to chant, because you're too passionate, because you can't sit in one place. I've given you only 16, it's nothing. It's like, oh, so what did Prabhupada do? He kind of did something you're not supposed to do. Mahaprabhu said, if you don't chant 1 lakh of rounds, 1 lakh is like 58, but we call it 64, just to round it off, because 64 sounds good. 16, 32, 64. If you don't chant 64 rounds, you're fallen. And as you probably know, in Chaitanya Bhagavat, it is said Mahaprabhu would not take prasadam at the home of anyone who's not chanting 64. What do they call it? A lack of something. You're a 64 rounder. What do you call it? A Lakishwar? Um, you know the name, Prime Minister?
Lakeshwar.
Is it? A Lakishwar. Unless you control 100 rounds, excuse me, 64 rounds, I want to eat your house, right? So now Prabhupada comes in and says, okay, it's time for the Special Olympics. It's like, and knowing Prabhupada, knowing the heart of Prabhupada and the mood, it's like, yeah, that's something he would do because he has to make it suitable so that we can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. That's really Lakpati, yeah, maybe. So I thought that was really interesting that he said, well, anyone who knows Prabhupada would not doubt that Prabhupada said that. Which is really interesting because probably there are people who would doubt it, and this devotee is making the accusation that you really don't understand. He told another story. Right? This is good to hear. He told another story. He said, you probably know this story, when there was devotees were going out in plain clothes, and then someone went to Prabhupada and said, oh, this is really bad. Devotees, they're wearing plain clothes because wearing secular clothing in those days represented like an inclination towards materialism. And so Prabhupada said, oh, this is not good, because that's what he heard. This is not good. And then they told Prabhupada, well, we're not doing it because we want to dress up. We're doing it because we want to distribute books. Then Prabhupada said, oh, okay. So he was making the point that Prabhupada just wanted to do what was best for spreading Krishna consciousness, and he wasn't overly attached to rules and regulations. Obviously, you have to be attached to some rules and regulations. It's not anarchy. But he was making the point, if you know Prabhupada's heart, you know he would make adjustments for the purpose of spreading Krishna consciousness. And, sometimes we get very mental about rules and regulations. So here's another story. Don't take advantage of this story. They were initiating a bunch of Bengalis, and the devotee said, Prabhupada, we can't initiate them because they don't follow all the principles. Maybe they're eating fish and, no illicit sex, however you define it. Probably that was not something that was really a principle that they followed. And they went to Prabhupada and he said, don't worry about it. That was his response. Don't worry, like that, don't worry about it. Or they're getting initiated. I'm not saying that was a general policy, but he would do those things. He wasn't as attached to rules and regulations as we might think he was. It wasn't that he wasn't, but he could adjust, seeing what was necessary. So I thought that was interesting. And we don't understand that nature of Prabhupada. Like we may not be able to adjust. So we have to adjust when we have to, and we should definitely not adjust when we shouldn't, or we don't have to. Definitely, if you don't have to, why do it? But there's certain things we would not adjust. We can adjust. But Prabhupada made adjustments to facilitate people becoming Krishna conscious. That's why he did it. Um, you know, the famous story of this adjustment Prabhupada made when this Grihasta was divorcing his wife and remarrying, and he told Prabhupada. Didn't ask Prabhupada permission. I don't think he asked permission. I think he informed Prabhupada that he's doing it, and Prabhupada did not say no. As far as I remember, he didn't say anything. And that was like just an aspect of Prabhupada's mercy. And because if the spiritual master gives an instruction and the disciple doesn't follow it, then the disciple is guilty of disobeying the spiritual master. That's not good, because if we commit offense to our guru, it harms our spiritual life. So Prabhupada didn't want this devotee to offend him. So sometimes the spiritual master will not give an instruction that is a good instruction because he knows the disciple wouldn't be able to follow it. Or sometimes Prabhupada would say, would you like to do this? He gives you the option. So if you say, no, I don't think I can, it's not an order. So that's why Prabhupada didn't reply to him, because he was just telling Prabhupada, this is what I'm going to do. And if Prabhupada said no, he's going to do it anyway. And then that would be the cause of his fall down. Interesting. You've heard this story before, I'm sure. It's such an important story. It doesn't mean that Prabhupada, as a principle, say, well, if you don't like your wife, get divorced and remarried, no problem. Because obviously, that's not what he was saying. But in individual cases, as we're seeing here, he might make exceptions. Not that these exceptions are the rule. And you can see when the Prabhupada made exceptions, he didn't say, here's the new rule. I mean, he could do that, but generally he wouldn't, right? Okay, even with 16 rounds, it's like, okay, you can't do more, but 16 is minimum, try to do more. So, like that. Hare Krishna. We have another story. I don't know if you heard the story. And again, I'm not reciting these stories as examples of rules. These are exceptions. Or maybe this is not such an exception. But sometimes it happens, as you know, because you have a body, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. They're very strong forces. We call them vegams, pushing. It's in the nectar of instruction. Manasa vegam, krodha vegam, udara vegam, udara pasta vegam, the vacho vegam, manasa, mind, krodha, anger, jiva vegam, tongue, udara pasta, belly, genital, ooh, pushing. So it does happen that sometimes a man who is trying to control his sex urge is not able to do it, and his wife wants to maintain strict celibacy. And the man, in his intense desire, might visit a prostitute. That happens. And this came to Prabhupada when one man was going. And you know what Prabhupada said? Anybody know what Prabhupada said? He said, cut off his head. No, he didn't say that. What did he say, Chaitanya Das?
If I'm not mistaken, he told the wife, "Oh, you couldn't, you
Yeah,
can satisfy."
something like, I think maybe the way I heard it, I could be wrong, but it's the same point that you're making. This man is going to a Prabhupada, your disciple so-and-so is going to prostitute. The way I heard it, it said, Prabhupada said, he doesn't have a wife. He said, I thought he was married. Something like that. So that's like, we're not going to say that in Bhagavatam class, and Prabhupada never said that. He never said it in his books. He never said it in Bhagavatam class, right? But in this instance, what is Prabhupada saying? If one has sexual urge, then he shouldn't satisfy it outside of marriage. Of course, we're not saying, oh, just get married and enjoy sex, and that's what it's for. I mean, you could interpret it that way if that's your desire.
Gurudev, I think your audio is not coming out from the mic.
Gauranga, really?
No.
Change.
Krishna, Chaitan. What about now? Yes?
Perfect. Perfect.
I hit the wire, yeah. So what I was saying was, it's not a principle. It's not a principle. It's not something Prabhupada's advocating. But this is a practical situation that may affect many devotees. Of course, it's a whole discussion, and it's not the point of this class to discuss that. But point of this class is that first story I told when Prabhupada said, okay, move in with a boy, get married, which is not like Prabhupada's condoning homosexuality. But it's just, he's trying to figure what's best. So he's looking at what's best for everybody, then he's adjusting. So we need to be flexible. We need to be strict, but flexible. You have to be both. If you're just one or the other, it doesn't work because life is both strict and flexible. Life needs to be strict and flexible, right? And that flexibility is Prabhupada's glory, and that strictness is his glory. And the ultimate glory is he can blend the two to do what's best for spreading Krishna consciousness. And this is what he was criticized for by some people in India who didn't understand that you have to be flexible to relate Krishna consciousness. The problem that I see is when you become flexible and you don't have to be, that's a problem. Like, so sometimes maybe you water something down to get people to drink it, but what if they could drink it without the water? Then you don't need to water it down. So we have to know when to add the water, when not to. If you don't add the water, sometimes they won't drink it. If you do add the water, it's like they have to drink 10 gallons. They could have got it all in a cup. So that's there also. All right. Yeah. So yeah, we had talked about the female Mexican president. Prabhupada didn't feel that women should be political leaders, but here's a problem, and this is a very sensitive issue. Prabhupada makes statements within a context of what's going on in the world. And as you know, the world has changed a lot. That context means current scientific understanding of things, right? Whatever those things may be, the human mind, brain. Society changes socially, values change, technology changes, things are different technologically speaking. So there's always this little question, if we're finding an instruction that Prabhupada gave inappropriate for the modern world, it doesn't seem to be working, or maybe working against us. So there's this question that comes up, if Prabhupada were here and he knew, because he were here, he knew what was going on, would he have said this? That's not a question that's easy to answer, but it's a question sometimes we have to ask. Would he have done what he did 50 years ago? Now, some people say he would have, it's eternal. And other people say there's many things he wouldn't have because the world is much different. Knowledge is much different, So in one sense, you can make Prabhupada look like a very, very narrow conservative person. But back in 1965, 68, 69, it did not look as narrow as conservative as it is today because things are way more liberal today than they were then. Anyway, that's a consideration. But that's not a question I could answer about any specific detail. But sometimes in your own application of Krishna consciousness or your own spreading of Krishna consciousness, you may run into a situation and go, this principle, this teaching doesn't seem applicable here. It seems to be working against things. I wonder how Prabhupada may have adjusted this. I wonder how we could adjust, adapt, trim off, add to, whatever. So it's not with everything, not all the time, but sometimes, yes, that is required. Because the ultimate goal is to help people become Krishna conscious, right? Isn't it? Yes. And that's the same thing with yourself. Like sometimes we have the question, well, what's better, 4 good rounds or 16 bad rounds? And I always am reluctant to answer the question. And I'll tell you why. Because the answer is 4 good rounds will help you more than 16. And that sounds like, oh, we're changing the initiation vows. Okay, all you initiated devotees, no word chant 4. Oh, fantastic. Music to my ears. No. Or you'll think Mahatma Prabhu's like, something's wrong with him. How can he say that? So it's true. It's true, my dear devotees, it's true. What is the good of 16 offensive rounds? 4 good rounds, much better, right? You can have 16 of something that isn't good, or you can have 4 good. So here's $16. They're all counterfeit. You want them? Or I could give you 4 real dollars. What do you think's better? And so something like that. But at the same time, we can't say that if we're initiated because we vowed to chant 16. Now, we have stories where devotees weren't chanting 16 rounds and they told Prabhupada. And he didn't say anything because he knew that devotee is not going to chant 16. And he said, you talk to him. Prabhupada, can you tell him? You tell him. He's not going to listen to me. Same thing. I don't want to give an instruction he can't follow. So Prabhupada was moving, sometimes there were devotees say, I can't finish my rounds. I'm working 20 hours a day. There's some like emergency, something. And he would say, during this time, you don't have to. In another case, he would tell another devotee, you have to. I don't care if you don't sleep, you have to. So you know, that's why it's like, that's why it's so easy to argue about what Prabhupada would want, because he does different things at different times with different people in different situations and gives apparently contradictory instructions because he's giving the instruction that's best for the situation. So it's the same thing when you analyze your own situation and what you're able to do and not able to do, you know. I was talking last night, we had a class in a Krishna house, and a class about comparison came up, and I was just saying, you know, if you really want to become depressed, I can think of a really good way, and that's comparison, right? Because when you compare yourself to somebody that you can't be like, then you set those standards for yourself, and then you suffer, because you can't be like that, and then you hate yourself, and you might be fine just on another standard. So, so I just want to say, like adaptation is what Prabhupada did. Of course, when you're initiated, you vow to chant 16. So you're not really supposed to adapt that. You can adapt before you get initiated. If you're not living in a temple or a situation where you have to. If for some reason you can't, or it's unhealthy, or whatever. You can say, how could it be unhealthy? But you know what I'm saying. Maybe you're neglecting some duties or whatever. So don't think of Prabhupada's like this, just like black and white, you know. Sometimes, in some cases, he was, because he saw devotees were very loose, and so he needed to be strict. And so sometimes, when you're trying to make a point, you'll even over exaggerate. So that may be explaining sometimes the confusion you may have. Why was Prabhupada so heavy here, but over here he wasn't? Well, maybe over here the situation was really bad. You know, I told the story once that a couple of sannyasis were traveling temple to temple, and they were giving 5 classes a day. They had 2 classes after breakfast, 1 or 2 classes after breakfast, and then they had, maybe they had Bhagavatam class and another class, and then we had, or 2 classes, then, you know, Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna book, and Nectar of Devotion. It was just lots of classes. And the devotees were getting out on Sankirtan like 2 or 3 hours later. But these sannyasis were insisting. And so the temple presidents wrote Prabhupada, and it's like, what's this nonsense? So he shut the whole thing down. I was actually there when this was going on in the temple. So this is firsthand information, Prabhu's and Prabhu's and Lady Prabhu's, Prabhurini's, Prabhu's. Yeah. Then, like a few months later, they were having problems in Hawaii. And you know what Prabhupada said? The exact opposite thing he said in this other temple. He said, you need to have 5 classes every day in Hawaii. Complete opposite instruction. Who is this nonsense saying 5 classes? Just go out and Sankirtan. So it's essential that you understand context. Because if you don't understand context, you'll become a rule body. It's like we give you a rule and say, I got a rule, and then you run with it. And you don't even know what the rule's about. You just run into a wall with it. Right? You know, my Guru Maharaj told me to run this way. Probably there's a wall there. I'm just going to run through it. Guru's order, you know, like that. You know, Bhakta Burfi on steroids. You know, you ever seen a devotee like that? Is doing something doesn't make any sense because the Guru gave the order, but he doesn't understand the order. Right? The Adventures of Bhakta Burfi. Da-dun. Guru Maharaj gave me an order. And he's running off the top of a building. And so Prabhupada didn't want disciples like that who couldn't adapt to the realities of situations, but were attached to their own ways of thinking, attached to their own cultural views, which might be harmful for people, for themselves, for the spreading of Christian consciousness. Okay. Oh, yeah. Henrik. Yeah, you can chant if you want, if you're still with me. Um, Recently I heard the theory food is an addiction. People who fast living only on air. People should fast living only on air. Well, I wouldn't say that because, I mean, like you can do that. You can only live on air. Yeah. What do I think? I think Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahma. Prasadam is important. You know, imagine you move in the ashram and like, okay, here's the program. You're going to have air for breakfast. You're going to have air for lunch. You're going to have air for dinner. I don't know how many people we would have, and we may be responsible for the illness of many. I'm sure some people can live on prana, but that wasn't Prabhupada's program. Shouldn't even be a question. Prabhupada didn't do that. People can do lots of things we don't do. Can do lots of austerities we don't do. What if devotees are too strict, not flexible, don't see the good intentions of others, even if they are learning how to respond, how to manage the situation? They can confuse happiness of devotees chanting with arrogance or severe austerity, criticizing others who have other needs. How to respond to this? Whoa, Hare Krishna. I think the best answer is be an example of how you would want other people to act. Sometimes it's all you can do, isn't it? Like sometimes you can't control a situation. You can only be an example. I mean, you can find other people you think would be sympathetic and discuss, say, we have a problem here. What are we going to do about it? And you might say, well, we can't talk to the leaders because they don't see the problem or they're not sympathetic. All right, but find people who are and talk about what can we do. And maybe all you can do is just be the way you would wish other people to be. Um, I think part of the problem is that some devotees need to expose themselves to a broader ways of thinking, like hearing from other teachers. Because if you're hearing from one teacher who's teaching something very narrow, then the problem you're describing is kind of normal. Or if everyone in that temple tends to be critical, then they'll naturally be that way also. So, um, it's hard. All I can say is it's hard. I was talking with a devotee. The devotee says that the devotee was saying that I understand. I've studied psychology, human nature, and I've studied the kinds of problems that people have because of their how they grew up in their childhood. You know, what happens. Not like anything horrible happened. It's just how you grew up, country you grew up, the situation, the culture, the way your parents raised you, and so on, formulates the way you are when you're older. And this devotee said, I can see in senior advanced devotees, I can see certain behaviors as reflections of their personality types, how they grew up, how their parents treated them, and like that. So it's difficult when you see that, because sometimes it's very clear. Why is he so upset? Well, it's clear for a psychologist to say, well, this is the reason. It's obvious. This is the symptom. And then the next thing from that is offense. Then you make an offense. And then the next thing after you make offense is we don't see you anymore. You've been eaten up by Maya. And you disappear. And the only time we chant your name is, whatever happened to Gabriella? I haven't seen her in class anymore. That's what's going to happen. So you have to be careful. So, as I've said before, some of the greatest lessons I learned were from people doing something that had such a bad effect on them or the people around him that I made a note. Note to self, don't ever do that. So sometimes that's all you can do. Because I don't know the particular situation, so I can't really advise what to do. You know, the technically the thing you should do is go to leaders and say, we have this problem in the temple here. Can you do something? But then you might say, well, the leader's the problem. So that complicates it, doesn't it? Then you can go to the GBC. But then you say, if I go to the GBC and the leader finds out, he'll kick me out of the temple, or he'll only, he'll only serve me the burnt rice on the bottom of the pot. He'll make my life miserable. So, this is not easy. Yeah. The other thing to remember is not everyone who acts improperly is doing it purposefully, consciously, or even knows it. And that's why I was saying some devotees don't know. They need to broaden their understandings. We all do. Yeah. Anyway, that's a difficult question without knowing details. We have a question related to the story about a prostitute. If a devotee has an uncontrollable sexual urge but doesn't have a wife, what to do? Well, the only answer Prabhupada would ever give is get married. I think it's really important. Let's not put the sexual urge in a box, in a compartment. Let's just talk about sense control. Is sense control important on the path of bhakti? Yes. Is sense control important on the path of anything? Yes. Is it especially important on the path of bhakti? Essentially important. Right? You can't have it if you don't control your senses. What are the senses that are the most difficult to control? The tongue, the belly, the genital, anger, speech, the verse we quoted. What does that verse say? If you can control those senses, you can become guru, you can save the world. But the implication is those are the senses we have to control. The better we are at controlling it, the faster we're going to move towards Krishna. Because all that you're trying to drive somewhere. I mean, you're in first gear. You can only go like 10 miles an hour, 16 kilometers an hour in first gear. So it's obvious you need to get in fourth gear. So it's like if we're not controlling our senses, it's like we're in first gear. It's so limiting. So sometimes people say, well, the sexual urge, it's like so strong. And not everybody says that, not some people. Everybody knows that. But, my question is always, well, how badly do you want to go back to Godhead? Because that's, if you don't get that under control, you're going to have to come back in another life to get it under control. And why waste time? You could fail this class. You have to take it again. Better just pass it. So then I would say it's really important when you're making a sacrifice to understand, not understand, but to remember what you're making the sacrifice for. Right? Like men, they work very hard for their families. And they make a lot of sacrifices. Some men do really hard labor. They work on roads in the middle of the night in the winter. Some are fighting wars. I mean, they do a lot. Why do they do that? Because their family is important to them. So, it's so hard to control our senses. Yeah, but You know, everybody in your city is up by, you know, on the road at 7 a.m. going to work. That requires some sense control. I can't stay up that late, right? They have to get up early and then they have to stay in office for 8 hours. That's not easy. So, you know, so I think, you know, I think there's this kind of like, well, I'm a devotee. You know, I shouldn't have to do all this austerity. But at least understand that if you want the goal, there has to be some sense control. There has to be some payment. And so when it's difficult to control, remember why you're controlling it, what you're going to get by controlling it. And if you can't control it, that's understandable, but control it to some degree. Don't just be unrestricted. So the idea is regulate the senses, control the senses as best you can, regulate. The better, the more you can control, the better. And I believe everyone can control themselves more than they think they can. I think that a lot of the problems that devotees are having and a lot of the things and conceptions they have are indicative of them not reading Prabhupada's books. I can't say always that's true because I don't know what your personal challenges are and I don't know your condition, your past conditioning. But often this is the problem, that with just a little more activation of intelligence, a little more inspiration, controlling oneself becomes easier. You know, it's like Chaitanya Dasi, I can give you 10 euros today. And Chaitanya Dasi is like, thank you. I've got to pay a parking ticket I got yesterday and I have no money. Thank you for the 10 euros. And I say, but if you wait to the end of the month, I'll give you 5,000 euros. Kind of a no-brainer, right? So it's sense control is like that. I know you want to do this and you need, but if you just can't control that or reduce that, then the reward you're going to get is thousands, infinitely greater, right? Because you'll get Krishna. So it's like, do you want Krishna? Are you willing to control yourself to get Krishna? How much are you willing to control yourself to get Krishna? And then you'll say, I can't control myself. Well, you can control some things. And probably you can control more than you think. And, you know, what if Krishna came to you and said, okay, here, I'm going to tempt you with this. But if you don't go with this, you get me. Well, that would be an easy choice, I would think. That would be kind of a strong impetus. Krishna's there and said, like, I'm ready to take you back to Godhead eternally. Or you can take this other thing, whatever this other thing is that is so dear to you. Probably you'd choose Krishna, I would think, right? And you wouldn't say, Krishna, I can't control myself. I don't think you'd say that. I hope you wouldn't say that. You could say it, but probably no. So whenever you say, I can't do that, ask yourself, Krishna offered himself to me if I did that. Could I do it? It's a good chance you could, right? So if we have an attachment, there's a way to deal with that attachment so that attachment decreases. If we give into that attachment, it just increases. And so we make it worse. We scratch the itch one time too much, and now it's infected and it's itching more. So you have an itch, don't scratch it. And if you have to scratch it softly and not often. And if you don't do that, then the itch is going to get worse and you'll scratch it more and it'll get worse and scratch it more. That's the idea. So in bhakti, we don't just do something because we like it. Oh, I can't control myself. I like this so much. We do it in a way that gradually will become detached from it. That's intelligent, right? We don't do it in a way that will become more attached to it. Like when Prabhupada was asked about Grihastha life, he said, you know, naturally, I'm attached to my wife, I'm attached to my children. Prabhupada said, yes. Just don't be so attached that you become more attached to them than you are to Krishna. This one woman told me, she told me and my wife, she said, I got a letter from my husband. Her husband was not with her. She got a letter and said something like, I miss you and I love you, but not as much as I miss and love Krishna. And some women might be like, oh, I'm divorcing that guy. And she said, this letter is perfect. I loved it. She said, I don't want him to love me more than he loves Krishna. This letter was perfect. I was very happy. So that's the idea, right? Naturally, you're going to be attached to your husband, your wife, your children. If you're not attached to them and you're not a Paramhansa, then something's wrong with you. Don't you think? If you're like completely detached from something and you're not a very elevated devotee, it could mean it's just like you're like, something is not right. Not always, but it could be. So Prabhupada said, yes, naturally you'll be attached, but not so attached that it impedes your Krishna consciousness. What would the point of that be? Right? So you have an attachment. How can you use it in a way that gradually you'll give it up? And that's the whole point. That's the whole point of Grihastha life. And some people think, oh, when I get married, then I go for it. That's not the idea. Yeah, you go for Krishna consciousness, but not for sense gratification. That's not the idea. And so Prabhupada said, all right, when you're married, you're given some license to enjoy in a way that brahmachari couldn't. But it's not like, if you know our philosophy, obviously, it's not like, oh, now it's okay to be in Maya and it's no longer Maya. No, how could that be? I'm in the Grihastha ashram, so now Maya is not Maya. Maybe to some degree that's true, but not completely, of course. And it's not that, well, you have a license for sense gratification. Does it mean you have to use it just because you have it? It's a limited use license. And if you don't need to use it, even though you're married, you don't have to. It's not like required. Right? Does that make sense to you? Makes sense to me. Yeah. So if you yeah, it's about balance. It's in the middle, right? I have to satisfy my senses. If I don't, I'll go crazy. And then I'll try to satisfy my senses, but then I'll indulge them even more because I'm restricting them beyond my level of renunciation. So I have to engage them in a way that I can be satisfied, and that desire gradually becomes purified. And if that doesn't happen, you're not utilizing them well. You're not utilizing the process well. Okay, Materna, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I had a realization from what you're sharing and from last night, our conversation where we were talking to a devotee. He said, yeah, it's just, people get married and then, okay, he was saying, get ready to just become detached because that's what this process is about. It's not about this whole, dreamy love, romantic thing. It never works out, he was saying. And I reflected after that, and my realization is I don't think people actually the majority become detached, they become averse.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And then, so you're actually in this relationship that's supposed to be, for a man, giving shelter to a woman, giving her security, providing a safe space for her to develop her Krishna consciousness. And then you're going, I don't really like how she treats me. I don't really like her that much. I'm not really that committed as a husband. So then you become averse and you're just like, we just stay together because, for these reasons, kids or money or so I don't look
And-
bad in the community.
And then you get
But
praised for being detached.
and right, then you get praised for being detached, and then you're thinking, yeah, I want to attach myself to Krishna. I'm going to be like go fully for Krishna, but Krishna's going, wait a minute, you're not doing your duty.
Yeah.
How can you attach yourself to me when you're not actually doing the duty that I'm asking you to in your marriage? This is like your main duty right now, and you're not doing it, and you want to just jump into me. It's like, it's jumping over our duty and trying to grab onto Krishna.
Yeah. It's an important point. And sometimes we don't even know the difference between detachment and aversion. In other words, the aversion is so intense, we think it's renunciation. But
Right.
as we know, aversion is only possible where there's attachment, because real detachment is neutral. You're not attached or adverse to the thing. You're just not interested. That's detachment. Think about what you're detached from right now, like something you don't like to eat. Well, that's not a good example because you're averse, but something like you just don't care about. Would you like this? No, I'm not interested. I don't care. You're not averse to it. You're just not interested in it. Doesn't give you any pleasure. That's real That's real detachment. Maternath, I don't know if you ever saw this happening in the Brahmachari ashram, but in my Brahmachari days, there was a phenomena that every once in a while, one Brahmachari started, ramping up the woman talk, how bad they are. And just, Brahmacharis sometimes talk like that, at least when they're young and whatever. I don't know today, but we did then. Kind of a unhealthy means of staying detached, so-called. And then, but periodically one brahmachari would just, take the lead and be really bad-mouthing women. And that was always the next one to get married. Do you have that experience, Maternath? You ever see that when you were in the ashram?
Yeah, I did actually. I one devotee who was he would speak about women and their, how entangling they are and like this. And then he actually revealed to me not long after that he went to a prostitute.
Yeah.
And then after that he realized like I need to get married. And then he had this whole conception how Indian women serve you and they're like the only one to marry. And he went to India and he got married and it was an absolute mess because there was a village girl in Vrindavan. And so all these misconceptions were just,
Yeah.
and his family actually became, I think, very upset with him. Her family became upset. Anyways, yeah, these things where we just think of the opposite sex or women as this or that instead of this is an opportunity to do devotional service.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so you confirmed, yeah. Well, 2 points. Wherever we see aversion, we know there's attachment. That should just be acknowledged. If you see it in yourself or another person, because nobody generally becomes, there may be exceptions, but generally no one becomes that adverse unless they're attached to something. If they're neutral, they're neutral. There's a phenomena going on in the Hare Krishna movement. It's been going on since I joined, and it still seems to be going on, which is really interesting. And Maternath, without describing it in detail, described it, that I am trained as a brahmachari to be servant. Yes, that's part of brahmachari training. I'm a menial servant. Our whole philosophy is das, das, anudas. It's all about I'm servant. Krishna, please make me your servant. One who's my devotee, says my devotee is not my devotee. When it's the devotee of my devotee is my devotee. It's everywhere in our philosophy. It's foundational. And that same man, when he gets married, enters the Ishvara Bhav. I'm the controller. Purusha Bhav, I'm the enjoyer. Isn't that interesting phenomenon? Like you like go against the whole philosophy. You know, no, in the house, I'm God. Right? All right. You might, and then you go to the purports, you know, Sukanya, Devahuti, this and that. You know, like you're like Kardama, right? You know. Okay, when you become Kardama, you can talk about your wife serving you like Devahuti. And so the philosophy is misused. Now I'm using the philosophy to again become God. You know, I couldn't do it in the Brahmacharya ashram, but in the Grihastha ashram, I could become God. So like I'm getting out of the Brahmacharya ashram. It's too restricting. You can't be God there. You just have to be a menial servant. I mean, and so then I can't wait to control this woman and have her become my menial servant. And then again, I become God. So what did you learn in the Brahmacharya ashram? I find it so interesting and such a powerful feature of Maya that the man gets in proximity of a woman, his desire to be God, control, and joy, it just like explodes from the humble brahmachari to the Ishvara Purusha Bhav, control and enjoyer mood. Have you seen that before, any of you? Isn't it weird? It's like there was like everything in your head about being a servant, it just dripped out when you saw that woman. Yeah. So when you were talking, Maturnath, I was thinking something that I've been thinking a lot lately. Nobody should enter a relationship with any other motive than to serve the other person, because any other motive is going to make that relationship difficult. Your motive is to serve. And if the husband and wife, both their motive is to serve, support, then it works. That's how it was meant to be. But if one is thinking, I'm here for all my needs to be fulfilled by you, and they're both thinking like that, where is that going? That's going into conflict, because there will be conflict. Whereas if it's like we're here together to serve. Okay. We still didn't answer that question. What to do if you have uncontrollable sexual desire? Learn to control it. That's the only thing I can say, because if it's uncontrollable, that means you will be controlled by it and it will harm your spiritual life. And if you want to go back to Godhead, then you have to make these sacrifices. And no matter how difficult it is, it's just, some things are difficult, but it's more difficult not to do it. So what is more difficult, controlling your sexual urge or letting your sexual urge control you? I would say the latter is more difficult, because it will cause you more misery and it will undermine your Krishna consciousness. Okay, we have Janaki's coming up with a counter argument. Jamunacharya says, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it and I spit at the thought. That statement seems like an aversion. But you have to quote the first part of the verse, because what he's saying is, well, number one, he's not saying I spit at women. He's saying I spit at the thought of my desire to enjoy women because I'm relishing Krishna consciousness. See, he was remembering, he was a king and he was remembering his affairs with women, and now he's relishing Krishna consciousness. So he's like, Krishna consciousness is so relishable. I can't believe I thought these relationships with women are relishable. So it's like, it's actually a statement of ecstasy. It just looks like aversion, but it's really ecstatic. Like, you ever have that, like, you ever have that thought? You see some video or you see somebody doing something that you used to do, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I used to do that. I was so stupid. And you're like, I hate that. That's so horrible. But it's coming out of your relish of Krishna consciousness, like I'll hear some rock and roll music. I can't believe I used to play that. So yeah, there is some aversion, but it's you could say it's pure aversion because it's based on attraction to Krishna. Like I'm so relishing kirtan, I can't believe that I used to do this other thing. So it's not an aversion in the sense that it has attraction in it. So the aversion we're talking about is it's got attraction in it, which is why we're adverse to it. But his spitting on the thought is like there's no attraction there. It's just like he's like, I can't believe I did something like that. Does that make sense? It's not exactly the same. There's no aversion in it. Sanjay said, perfectly right that we have to control, limit sense gratification, but even in Grihastha ashram, life is difficult to control sense. It is said, the more you scratch, the more you want. Prabhupada said very genuinely, the child is very important in Grihastha life. Grihastha life is more about responsibility. When you have a kid in your home, you always think about his development. And you sacrifice many things, yeah. Your big responsibility is to make your child Krishna conscious. It is only possible if you're Krishna conscious. That's a very good point. That's the byproduct of sex. So sex without responsibility, without having children, it doesn't help you. But if you want to purify your sex life, then you have children. And so that's what happens when you do it properly. You have children. And that's how you become purified, as Sanjay rightly said. You see, the whole problem is that in our culture, we have contextualized sex as the ultimate enjoyment. So it's all surrounded by romance and different partners, and yeah, we don't have to go into it. But Krishna never said that that's what sex is about. Krishna said, dharma, viruddha bhuteshu. Kamosmi bharatarsha. What does that mean? Krishna said, I am sex. What kind of sex? Sex with your wife, with your husband. What for? For having children. That's where I appear. That's religious. And that kind of sex will detach you. It's responsible. But this other kind of sex, it's irresponsible. It's created irresponsible men. And pornography is the ultimate level of irresponsible sex. It's vicarious, irresponsible sex, which destroys the very foundation of what a man needs to control himself and commit to a woman. Like pornography is way worse than many people understand. Like whoever invented the internet, I wish you didn't. Just for this one thing. Well, there's a couple things. We're destroyed. The internet is actually destroying the world. You know, you look at the pros and cons. As I often said, if there were Brahmins on the planet, they would have definitely restricted the internet. And they would have chopped off the heads of all the people who own pornography sites. I don't know if they chopped their heads off, but they would stop them. They wouldn't allow it. Or they would regulate it in some way. So you have to curb the sexual thing in some way. You have to understand it in some way. And the way is recommended eternally, except in the last 50 years, is to be married, oh my God, to one person. Can you imagine how difficult that is? Although that's what's been done historically, you know, generally, at least religiously speaking, that's how it works. And you satisfy your sexual needs in that relationship, and specifically by having children. And taking care of children is a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money. And it actually purifies you. It's so interesting. It's like, what happens when you eat? Why do you eat? What happens when you eat? You eat to nourish your body. Not that we always do it. We eat because we like it, but the purpose is nourishment. Right? So the purpose of sex is to have children. That's the consequence. Pretty obvious, isn't it? So could you imagine a society that had pills that allowed you to eat, like you could eat all day and you wouldn't get sick and you wouldn't gain weight and everything you're eating would just come out. Wouldn't you think that was weird? Wouldn't you think something's wrong with society? They just want to eat all day? A gluttonous society? Well, what's the difference with sex? Take a pill and you can just have it as much as you want. You won't have children. I don't really see it any difference from eating. Of course, modern women, they probably shoot me if they heard me. Just don't put this on the internet. I don't want to die. Because this will not make sense to them. Because this is what happens when you've strayed so far from what sex is used for that people will think, this Mahatma Das, I like him, but he's nutty. His celibacy has made him crazy. You hear the things he's saying? Like he's sexually repressed. He's saying all these things. No, I'm not. Yeah. And so I'm only saying what religious people have always said. But in modern society, that's like, whoa, bad news. What's wrong with you? You know? Anyway, it's just obvious. But when you're not controlled, it's not obvious. It can't be obvious to someone who doesn't control themselves. But once you control it yourself, then these things become obvious. And people say, well, I don't know about celibacy, right? Once you try it, then you'll know about it. Try it for a week. It'll be the best week of your life. Or maybe the worst week, I don't know. But if you can actually do it, it'll be amazing. Yeah. Because that week, that 1 week that you do celibacy, you don't have to think of the opposite sex at all. You don't have to worry about what you look like, what people think about you. Doesn't matter because who cares? Best week of your life, right? And think of all that energy you could save. Because you're not thinking about your body and what other people think about you, and you're not thinking about the opposite sex and their body. You can actually think about something more important. You can free up all that energy. That's what we're doing, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Carlos is recommending my course on sexual purity. Okay. Element of repentance in Jumanacharya's statement. Yeah, we could say that. I think there's disgust for sure. I mean, we all have that disgust. I can't believe I used to do this. It's disgusting. All of us who were not born vegetarians, if you see somebody eating meat, you're like, I can't believe I used to eat that. It's disgusting. It's the same idea. So, it's aversion, but aversion without, it's pure aversion, not contaminated by any form of attraction, right? Mm. Somehow or other, Prabhupada has given us this philosophy and this, and the basis of our philosophy requires some level of a good level of self-control. It's just the process. And it's what makes a Brahmin a Brahmin. And Prabhupada wants us to be Brahmins. A Brahmin is self-controlled. Does the world need self-controlled people? What do you think? Would it be nice if the leaders of the world were more self-controlled? Of course, right? Well, if you think the world needs more self-controlled people, then that means we should be volunteering, signing up for it, right? Because we're part of the world. And self-controlled people are in a perfect position to help other people because they have nothing to gain from them. And people who aren't self-controlled potentially could exploit you. So how can you be fully compassionate if you're not self-controlled? You can't be, right? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. You know what's going on in the world today. Everything I said in this class is, it's just one duh statement after another. That's all it really is. But society is so far off from where it should be that you have to make duh statements to get them back on track. That's the problem. You have to say obvious things, but people will argue with you. How could you say that? It's like, it's obvious, isn't it? No, 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 no. That's how far off we've gone. We've become so off morally, religiously. Isn't it? You know all the crazy things people say. If you're on the internet more than 3 minutes a day, you know the crazy things that people say. Why are they saying that? Because society has become so irreligious that if you say something just common spiritual sense-wise, many people will just attack you, right? Okay, that was a long introduction. Now we can read something by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I'm just downloading on you what I think about, especially the last statement I said. I think about it a lot. I'm sure you do also. Okay, we have verse 16 of the song title. What's the name of the song? You don't know? It's about the holy name. In spite of all these offenses, I pray that if ever in my life this most fallen soul has once accidentally uttered just a faint glimpse of your holy name without offense, then kindly mitigate all of my faults and allow me to chant your name simply for the pleasure of you both. No title, but I will find the title. No, it has a title. You mean, yeah, we know what you mean. It has a title and she will find it. Yeah. So this is interesting. This reminds me of the last verse of Isopanishad. Agne Sapat. Agne Supadayasman. The devotees praying like, if I've ever done anything good, Krishna, give me credit for it because I'm leaving my body and I need credit. You know that verse? It's the last verse of Isopanishad. Please remember all the good things I've done. So here, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's making a deal with Krishna. If I've ever done anything as payment for this request, then please, please let that good that I've done be my payment. So mitigate all my faults. I was thinking yesterday, it was yesterday, I was giving a talk on past conditioning. I didn't mention this, but I had a thought. It's a nice thought. Ask a question. All the problems you have, all the conditioning you have, all the attachments you have, all the desires which are not Krishna conscious, if they could be removed, all the lust, anger, greed, envy, if they could be removed, just gone, would you allow that to happen? And how do you think you would feel? And I think most people would say yes, and I would feel amazing, right? So this is like how a devotee thinks. Krishna, could you just like remove all of this? Because I don't need it. Not only do I not need it, it's just getting in the way. Wouldn't that be nice? The little bhakti pill, take this bhakti pill every morning as soon as you wake up. It relieves what? Lust, anger, greed, envy, resentment. Like, would you take it? I think if you're a materialistic person, you wouldn't. You say, well, how would I exist? How would I have any inspiration to do anything? I wouldn't want to compete. I wouldn't want to outdo people. I'd lose my edge. I wouldn't be sarcastic anymore. Yeah, that might be there. For devotees? No. So It's kind of what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is praying for. Like, Krishna, I'm kind of tired of having lust, anger, greed, envy, etc. Could we make a deal? You know, I've done something for you. Could you just like pay me back and just remove it all? So that's a nice mood to chant with. Hare Krishna, please remove it all. All those things. Now, there's two things. You might say, oh, yeah, all these things, they cause me anxiety. But how about this? There's a higher thing. Is all these things are getting in the way of my relationship with Krishna, because it's not just about me and my anxiety. I would be, if I didn't have all of those, I would be happy. It's kind of like Brahman realization or something. Right? So that's not the goal. The goal is to make Krishna happy. And so Krishna, if I didn't have these desires, our relationship would be closer, better. So that's Bhaktivinoda is not saying, I'll be more peaceful if you remove all this. That's no. It's like these are the things that are getting in the way. If you remove them, then I can come closer to you, right? Mm. That's what he's saying, isn't he? Saying, if you remove them, then I can chant for your pleasure. He's not saying, if you remove them, then I'll feel better. That's what you were thinking, right? Oh, if we remove all these, I'll be happier. But that's not what he's thinking. He's thinking, I can make you happier. That's the difference between us and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We're always thinking about how we can be happy, and a pure devotee is always thinking how to make Krishna happy. And here's the evidence right here. Ta-da! Beautiful. It's from the Gita Mala, but we don't know many chapters in it, I suppose, right? Maybe. A garland of songs, Gita Mala, Gita Mala. All right. Gaurapriya says, in psychotherapy with my patients, I have seen the havoc that pornography consumption, the idealization of love, and that the partner must satisfy my needs has left for mental health and couple relationships, the havoc of polygamy in people and polyamory. I don't know what that is. In people, poly means many. Many love, polyamory, many loves. And having sexually consumed the body of others and allowing oneself to be treated as a sexual object. It's awful for people, yeah. This is why, Gaurapriya, this is why I say American society, modern society is finished, is over because of this. This is, one lady rightly said, beautifully said, you can evaluate the value of any action in society by how it affects the children. How does this love sexual madness affect children? Well, you didn't want the children, number one, often. You don't stay together, and that totally messes up most children, at least handicaps them. You have a horrible relationship, it affects the children, where there's abuse, verbal, physical, sexual, in the home, children are affected by it, on and on. So this is like, you know, the family's the foundation, healthy family, foundation of healthy society. So with this going on, it's like this is the antithesis to religion. And that's why more and more people are becoming irreligious. And sometimes I think, I don't know if you feel this way, sometimes I think, if you're going to be irreligious, do it in style. Don't profess to be spiritual and say all these things. Just say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in anything. I just want to do whatever I want to do. Okay. All right. I understand that. You're a normal human being. You want to enjoy yourself. You don't want to be restricted. You just want to do what you want to do. But I just want to do what I want to do in the name of God is worse because you're corrupting religion. Just like, you know, just say, I don't believe in God. That's better than saying, I do and I believe in this. This is the big crack in the foundation. And if this crack is not repaired, wow. Wow, wow, wow. It's affecting all of us. And it's affecting all the people now who are growing up, who will become devotees in the future when they try to have healthy relationships. So if we don't help them, many, many people are not coming out of functional families where they've seen good examples and they know what to do, and they've never had relationships with other men or boys, men or girls. Thank you for that. Gila Mala, Chapter 2, Karpanya Panjika, Diary of Selfish Humility. Ami Ata Dina Mati. Hare Krishna. Okay. Beautiful. Hmm. Hare Krishna. Yeah. So, ladies, your value in modern society is what? Your beauty, your sexual appeal. That's your value, right? Is that what it's going to come down to? Nothing more than that. You are an object. How does it feel to be an object of men's lust? Not good, does it? So, as Matranath was saying, a real man protects women. And so we don't have real men. Real men rape women. They're raping them in their minds. They're raping them with their eyes. That's not a real man. A real man's protecting. How can I serve? How can I take care of you? Right? Now, my dear devotees, we have a problem in the Hare Krishna movement. A lot of people in charge are not protecting women. Not that they're exploiting them, they're just not protecting them. They're not standing up for them. They're not advocates for their needs. So real men would, putting women down is not a sign of a real man. Protecting women is a sign of a real man. Facilitating their service is a sign of a real man. Right? So if you're in the association of a man and you feel protected, then you can say, he's a real man. I don't feel lust coming from him. I don't feel he's trying to exploit me or enjoy me, but he sees me like a mother. That's a real man. Then you're in the presence of a real man. If you don't feel that way, you're not in the presence of a real man. You're in the presence of someone who wants to use you. And it's important to know that. And important not to marry one who wants to use you. For sure. Okay. Our time has elapsed. You have 2 minutes to scream or object to what I said or agree with it or whatever. I don't know. Sometimes I get excited and I say things and then I look at the video later and like, oh, don't put that up there. I'll be hung at the stake. But anyway. It's like it's not these views. When you start talking about sex, this is not a popular topic unless you're talking about it in the way modern people do. But my little motto, maybe we should have a t-shirt or a button. Try celibacy. It works. Yeah. Try celibacy. It works. Try celibacy. It'll change your life. Should have a t-shirt. You can all wear it wherever you go. And people will be like, I don't know if it's safe to wear that t-shirt. Then I might get sued. I wore that t-shirt. I got attacked. I'm suing you for making that t-shirt. I wouldn't doubt something like that could happen. You'd get in a lot of arguments, that's for sure. Maybe we could word it in a better way. Try celibacy for a week, see what happens. And they're like, why would you want to do that? You'll never know until you try it. Just try it, then you'll find out. Try it for a week and tell me. That was the worst week I ever had. I almost killed myself. That was the best week I ever had. I didn't have to think about it. Yeah. Okay, a new t-shirt. Tell Ashalata. I don't know. Should we print a t-shirt like that? Yeah, Chaitanya Dasi says we started liberal, we ended it. We started Democrat, we ended a Republican. The thing is, devotees are Democrat and Republican. Because devotees, family-wise, have very traditional values. don't they? They really have, and in other ways, we're into India and all this exotic stuff, and all the Republicans think we're crazy, but we have very Republican conservative values also when it comes to family, education, use of drugs. Okay, I'm going to disappear. I have, yeah, take care of stuff. And Hare Krishna to all of you. And Kormani will feel your separation. I'm going to go now. Hare Krishna.
Grace Mahatma Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.